Well, good morning, everyone. It is absolutely brilliant to be up here and having the opportunity to share with you this morning. You know, over the last few weeks since we started at Christmas, have I actually done this? Yes. Since we came back after Christmas, we've been getting really excited about the church. We've been talking about the way that people's lives are being transformed through knowing Jesus and being part of this community of people. We've been talking about the way God is building a community together in this church and in churches around the world. And it's something to be excited about. And we've been talking about the way that every single one of us, even you, every single person here has got a part to play in it. And so this morning, I am going to be continuing in our series, The Church, Christ's Bride. And I'm going to be talking to us this morning about one particular image that the Bible gives us to describe the church. And that is the picture of the bride of Christ. I'm holding this the wrong way around. That's good, isn't it? Where's the buttons? Do you know what? The bride of Christ. It's in our title series. But I love the image that the Bible paints of God's church being a bride and that Jesus is a groom. You know, I think it paints a great image of God's love, or Jesus' love for his church. It paints an image of his delight for who we are and what he's created us to be. It reveals something of his plan for marital unity. And the fact that Jesus is united to you, his church. And you know what I think it also says? We sang about it. We sang and sang and sang this morning. It was amazing. It was swelling my heart. But it talks about the promises that God makes. Just as a husband and wife, a bride and a groom may stand before one another and make promises, you know what? Jesus has made promises to his church also. And he will be faithful to those promises. He will fulfill those promises. Now, Josh has given you a little heads up to me and my family. But here's an image of us walking out in Bracknell in the forest there. Josh has mentioned my wife, Vicky, there. She's an amazing woman. Do you know, I just want to take a second. She's actually had to take one of our kids home who wasn't feeling that great. But I want to know if you're watching this, Vicky, all right, she is an amazing woman. She's an amazing mum. She is a fantastic and highly regarded speech therapist who set up her own business and is so well respected. And she's a woman who gives so sacrificially of herself for the people around her that she loves. And you know what? She's got a big heart, so she loves a lot of people. You know what? I love that woman. And it was on the 4th of July, 2009, that I got to call her my bride. All right? I know we look like children. Yeah, okay. Yeah. You still do, Chris. You still do. Yeah? Okay. Now, let me tell you a little bit about our wedding, just to paint a bit of a picture. So our wedding we got married in Woking, which is just down the road from here. But we were actually living in South Wales. We'd been students at Cardiff, and when we were getting married, we were coming back to Vicky's home territory again. So just a few days before our wedding, we made the journey from South Wales to Surrey. And the day before the wedding, a number of our friends and family gathered around us and helped us to set up our venues. All right, maybe you've been involved in something like that in the past as well. And we were laying out flowers and drapes in the church, and we were hanging lanterns and swags of fabrics and candles and tablecloths, and it all looked beautiful in the village hall that we'd hired as well. It was just what we dreamt about. And then after that, we went out for a meal, and you might see some pictures of people sat around in a pub. And that was the evening before, and we were thanking our friends and family for standing with us in that time. But you know what? There was a moment in the early evening where Vicky and I bid farewell to one another. It was the night before our wedding, and we were going away our separate ways to be able to prepare ourselves for the big day ahead. It was a day where we were beautifying ourselves, and for Vicky that was an easy job, but for me, well, took a little bit more time. But we were laying out our clothes, having our hair done and things. You can see, there we go, some pictures there that came from our photographer. And you know, it was a time of both physically preparing ourselves and mentally preparing ourselves for what was to come. I mean, it's significant when a bride and groom are united again at a wedding ceremony, at an altar, and promises are made. Lives are changed. The future is going to look different. Well, you know, I think Jesus was talking about a similar time when in the Bible he's speaking to his followers, and he knew that his time was coming where he was about to depart. You know, I wonder if you've got a Bible with you today, if it's on your phone, maybe you've got a retro copy like me, a paperback, or not, the words will appear on the screen as well, but we're going to read from John 13 this morning, and I'd love to be able to share with you why I think that Jesus, this has some parallels to that very familiar sense of a wedding service. So, Jesus is talking to his disciples here in chapter 13 of the Gospel of John. And this is his first church of 12 people, and he's talking to them about leaving. So let's read it together now. Jesus says this, "I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told you, as I told the Jews, so I tell you now, where I am going, you cannot come." Oh man, can you imagine being one of those disciples? It's come out of the blue to you that Jesus is now going. I mean, you've been hanging out with this man who you think is pretty awesome. You've laid down everything in order to follow this one man. And you've been really enjoying just hanging out with him, eating with him, laughing with him, but also watching what he's doing. You've been watching him transforming the lives of people around him. He's been taking those who are the lowest in society, those who are disregarded, and he's elevating them to a position of respect. He's been performing miracles, setting people who've been caught up in all sorts of captivity, whether emotional health, like mental health, whether physical ailments, and he's been releasing them to be free again. And then all of a sudden, boom, he announces he's off. Can you imagine that moment? I mean, Vicky and I, we knew that time was coming the night before our wedding, that we were going to have our final night apart. We were going to be away from one another. But we knew that the day after, we were going to be reunited again. In fact, we were going to be united together as husband and wife. But they didn't have any sense of that at the time. They didn't see it coming. Jesus knew he was coming back. He made promises about that later. But they didn't know what was to come. Now, he knew that when he returned, that all the preparations for their marriage would be complete and that you'd be united together. But it's this time apart when Jesus ascended into heaven and when his church was left to prepare for his return that we're talking about. And you know, we're living in that time today. Jesus made a promise. You can see up on the screens about the time when Jesus was ascending into heaven. But he did make a promise that he would come back and take his bride. And we today, church, can get excited about this. We can be excited that we know that Jesus, who we've sang about this morning, the Jesus that we can read about in the Bible, is going to return and take us. Now, when we got married, Vicky took my surname, McKinley. It's a significant thing that she adopted a new identity, leaving behind her old surname and taking on that name. It means something because when the bank writes to her, she's Mrs. V.L. McKinley. When she does her tax return, she fills in the name Victoria McKinley. Even her own family now know her as Vicky McKinley. Things have changed. Oh dear, this is not good. Here we go. I'm gesticulating too much. I've knocked off my own screen. Here we go. Here we go. Yeah. But in the next chapter, we're reading of John's Gospel. Jesus gives his church an instruction. He wants his church to be known for something other than just a surname. He wants his church to be famous for something. And we're going to read that now. Jesus said this. This is the very next verse. He says, "A new command I give you. Love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." You know, Jesus wants his church, his bride, to be known by their love for one another, not by a surname, but by an attitude. Jesus says that it will be this love for one another that will identify his church as being his. So in this time of separation where Jesus has ascended into heaven and his church is awaiting his return, he has given this instruction to his church. And that's his encouragement to us today, is that we love one another. It will point people to who we are and whose we are, Jesus. Do you notice that term, one another? Maybe you've heard that before. If you've been in churches before, maybe you've heard this term. I love this term, one another. It's got some sort of synergy to it, some movement and action. You know, it suggests that like one person's doing something for someone and then they're doing something in return. It's kind of you're loving them and they're loving you, or you're helping them and they're helping you, or you're shaping them and they're shaping you. It's about two committed parties who are working together for their mutual good. And I'm not just talking about like a marriage relationship or a romantic relationship where this is like an exclusive thing. This is not an exclusive thing. No, what I'm saying is Jesus wants his church to be a community of people who are committed to one another. Do you know that? You know, Jesus was a revolutionary. He upturned tables, he broke from societal conventions, and he honored the outcast and turned people's lives around. You know, motivated by love, he was transforming people's lives and their futures. He was building a people together to be a community who could love one another and be a witness to the world around them, that they too could come and be part of God's community. And you know, that love that has been expressed by the church, that Jesus himself has demonstrated to his church, has actually been changing lives from generation to generation and from population and culture to culture around the world since Jesus walked the earth. Do you know what? Today, I am going to give you the classic 12-point sermon, you'll be pleased to know. I'm going to go big today because I want to help us to think about how we can become and continue to be a church community who one another well. So are you ready? Yeah. You got 12 whole points in you? Sitting there. I hope you had lots of coffee. No, this is going to be quick, so let's go. Number one. In Romans 16, and all of the points that will come up on the screen, if you're not familiar with some of these names on the end, they're books in the New Testament, and these are written by people who followed Jesus and have left kind of stories and examples for us to be able to follow. And so in Romans 16, verse 6, we are instructed to greet one another. Now, in that passage, it actually says greet each other with a holy kiss. All right, and I'm not suggesting, church, that we need to go around slobbering over one another. I mean, if that's what you want to do, ask the permission of the person you're about to do it to, all right? However, all right, I think as a church community, we can make sure that we greet one another. Maybe when we come into church, okay, actually, these are my brothers and sisters in Christ. Hey, it's great to see you. All right? Often it can be really easy, can't it? We come into church and we might just want to sit in our seat and actually not make eye contact with people. I want to encourage you that Jesus encourages you to greet one another when you come into church, or when you're walking down the street or you're in the supermarket and you spot someone. Don't avert the gaze, but inquire of that person. How are you today? It's great to see you. I'm so pleased and encouraged to know that you're here too. Don't be shy. Say hello. Our second one, offer hospitality to one another. 1 Peter 4 verse 9 encourages us to be able to do this. Now, some of the best times that we've had as a family in church is when we've been able to spend more time than just a Sunday with those around us. You know, even last night we were invited to someone's home for dinner, and I said they'd be able to sit very smugly when they got to this point in the in the morning. They heard me saying this. But you know what? Actually spending time with people, it means that you get to know them. It means you get to know the real them. We're working with one another. We're enjoying one another. We're building up relationship and community. This is a way that Jesus wants us to be known as a people who one another together. Let's look at number 3. It says, accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you in order to bring praise to God. We want this church to be a place where you can come as you are, where you know that you will be accepted. If we are a people who are looking at other people and thinking, oh, they're not the same as me. Oh, they're not going to, they don't appear like the right type of person to be here. We're not going to see the love of God extended to the world around us. People will not see that he loved us when we can't love one another. Let's accept one another as we go. You're great at this church. You are absolutely fantastic at this. Let us be a church that is famous for this, as Jesus has instructed us to be. Number 4, we're to build one another up. You know, Vicky and I, we were going through a hard time a few years into our marriage. It was not specific to our marriage, but we were both going through quite difficult circumstances. And there was a couple in the church that we were part of who spotted this, and they invited us over for a coffee one evening, and they said, look, I can see that life's tough. Life is tough. And they spent week after week doing this. They invited us back every week. And they encouraged us, and they helped to lift our eyes again when we were struggling. And as the weeks went by, we started to see the fruit of what they were doing. We were feeling better. We were ready to go again. You know, when we're instructed to build one another up, do you know what? If you're encouraged, if you're told that there's value in you and you're good and you've got worth, you know that is going to make people healthier, stronger, more ready to be able to go about life. So church, let's continue to be a church that builds one another up and encourages one another through hard times. Number 5, we're encouraged to care for one another. You know, actually, this passage, which is in Philippians 2:4, says, look to the interests of others rather than to your own interests. All right? We're there to look to the interests of others. You know, I just want to stop a moment and tell you a few stories that have happened around this church where I've seen this care for one another happening. Do you know, I have seen people who've given up weekends upon weekends to be able to help someone pack up their house so they can move. What a massive job it is to be able to move house, right? People have cared for one another in this church. When a new mum or when a mum gives birth to a child, this church gathers around and they often will prepare up to, say, 2 weeks worth of meals to be able to love and bless that person. You know, when someone's going through a hard time, when maybe they're grieving, when they're struggling in their marriage, I've seen this church come alongside one another and pray for one another and stand with one another. This is what we should be known for, church. And do you know what? You can look around and you think, but I can't tell everyone in this room all of that stuff. I mean, it's going to take ages. I can't care for everyone in this room. Well, the beauty is that right throughout the week, in homes around Farnborough and Camberley, we have people meeting together in smaller groups, in our midweek small groups, in order to do just this. In order to bear with one another, in order to love one another, in order to demonstrate hospitality and to be really known. I want to encourage you, if you're not involved in a small group, I want to encourage you to find out about getting into one. I want to encourage you, if you are part of one, but maybe you just don't go that often, and you're feeling a little bit like, do you know what? I don't even know. Am I even loved in this church? Do people even care? I want to encourage you to get involved in that community once more, to be able to step in and really feel that you are part of something. We're instructed to care for one another, and this is how we will be known. Number 6, we're encouraged to spur one another on to encourage one another to succeed. You know, in the world, all right, it's often the case that we see people really like bidding to outdo one another. We can see that when you go for jobs and in business, and you're hoping that the competitor fails and things. You know what Jesus says? He wants us to champion everyone to be succeeding. He wants us to build one another up. The night before I ever stood on a stage at the Beacon, it was the first time I'd ever preached, and the phone rang, and I was really nervous, you can imagine, standing up here. And it was someone from this church who said, well, I've just been praying for you. I know you're going to be preaching tomorrow. And I just want to encourage you to go out and be awesome. I want to say to you, I'm really pleased that you're standing up to do that. Now, this person, I think, has something in their heart to want to preach also, all right? But they were building me up to be able to do that. Church, we can be famous for this. We can be people who are like kind of cheering on, championing one another. Let's be famous for that, church. Number 7. In Galatians 5, verse 13, we read this: you, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free. But don't use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. We are encouraged to be people who serve one another. I put this picture up here today. This is Mark Trudinger, and I wanted to celebrate him today. All right, he's actually out in our kids team in the Beacon Kids today, and he is serving you families that have brought children here today by looking after the children, giving them a really great fun time and helping them to develop and build personal faith. But the reason I particularly want to honor Mark today is that Mark has been serving in our Beacon Kids for 20 plus years, and today is going to be his final Beacon Kids slot. And in fact, it was meant to be last week, and then he stepped in again this week because they were shorter, right? So bless him. He has given over 20 years to serving the families and children of the Beacon Church. And I just want to honor that. What an example that is, that someone, he could say, I could come in here. I'd love to be part of that singy worship stuff. That's really fun. I love that. That makes me feel good. But instead, he's given himself out to go and do that. A church that serves one another, blesses one another. We want to be known for being that church, doing it for the benefit of others. Number 8, we are to bear with one another's burdens. You know, in Galatians 6, verse 2, the context of this is that the Paul, who is the author, the writer here, a follower of Jesus, is talking about someone who's actually made a mess of their situations. It's talking about bearing with someone who has sinned, who has messed it up. And do you know what? I think that's what we need to be known for, don't we? We need to know that if we mess it up, that there'll be people around us who will help us. There'll be understanding of, yeah, you got it wrong. I get that. But I'll stand with you. I'll help you on that journey. Do you know what? It says that we should help one another, not with like a bludgeoning hand, not like a, you must get it better next time, all right? But we should restore one another gently. Wouldn't it be easier to know that if you mess up, that the people around you are not going to like kick you to the side, but actually will stand with you, they'll hold your hand, they'll say, okay, I get that. Let's go. Let's try it again. Let's love one another. Let's help you to try again. This would be what would make Jesus' church famous. Number 9, we're to forgive one another. We let one another down, don't we? We don't get it right all the time. I know that this week I have let people down. I've said that I'll call them and I've not managed to do it. I've said that I would. Yeah, I've been thinking about them. I've known they're going through a hard time and I've not actually had opportunity to do that. I pray that you'd forgive me for if I have let you down. But you know what? I think that's what we can be famous for. We can be different to the world that hold grudges, that kind of want to, when people mess up, that's it, they're written off. We need to be known that we can forgive one another just as we have been forgiven by Jesus himself. Let's make that a real effort to forgive one another. Number 10. We're to live at peace with one another. Romans 12, verse 16 says this: do not be conceited, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as depends on you, live at peace with one another. Wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't you like to be part of that world? Where people live at peace with one another. I think the challenge here is not to repay anyone evil for evil. You know, someone lets you down, you go into a shop and they don't give you good kind of what you want, and you, like, I'm gonna not live at peace, I'm gonna live harmony, I'm gonna resent them, I'm gonna hold them to that. Or where someone kind of cuts you up in the car and you, okay, there you go. There's a few people smiling. You're obviously like me and feel like that as well. All right. But what about in the church? What about that person that you thought cared but hasn't spoken to you for the last 6 months? Let's live at peace with one another. Let's be the first to go after that person. Let's do everything as far as was possible for us to make peace with one another. What a difference that would make. Number 11, speak truth to one another. Does anyone get fed up of having to come into church sometimes and present like, yeah, it's all okay, it's fine, yeah, I'm having a great time? Jesus encourages us to speak truth to one another, to take off the mask and to be real one another. If a church is healthy and loving, and I know this church is good at that, then we can take off our masks. It's a safe place to be real with one another. So let's speak truth to one another. Wow, this is going quick, isn't it? We're getting through them because we're at the final point. Is everyone ready for it? Yeah. Woo! Here we go. It's a real good one. Confess your sins to one another. Woo-hoo-hoo! Therefore, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another so that you may be healed. You know, when the church loves one another, you know that you can come, you can say where you're at, you can say what you're feeling, you can say what you've done, and you don't cover up. You know, the world, leaders around the world, they're not trusted, are they? People, we don't trust them because people cover up for their own good, to make themselves look good. You could probably think of stories that have been in the news just this week where this has been happening, all right? But this is a healthy place to be, because when we confess where we've messed up, where we confess where things are not going right, we can get healed. And the difference is that we are taking control and letting God take control in those areas rather than let sin control us. We don't want that, do we? So that is our 12 points, okay? Maybe if you've not taken notes, this would be a good time to get your camera out and take a picture. If you want to look these up, know how to love one another better, how to one another together, then go for it. But you know, there's actually 100 references to one anothering in the New Testament alone. These are scriptures, passages of people explaining their understanding of how that we can one another, how we can fulfill what Jesus has given us, to love one another, to be countercultural, and to be famous for doing so. Remember, Jesus said, "A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you." So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you're my disciples. I mean, think of it another way. What is the alternative? We live in a culture where we ignore one another, where we live separately from one another, like we don't even like them, where we reject one another and knock one another down, where we serve our own needs, where we secretly hope that others kind of fall flat on their faces and don't succeed, because it'll probably make me look better, won't it? Where we become consumers seeking what we can get out of it, where we criticize one another, finding fault, where we live warring with one another and rubbing each other up the wrong way, where we have to wear a mask, because if we don't, then they're going to pull us apart. They're going to tear us apart. They're going to knock us back. Where we have to cover things up, which then allows sin to rule us. got a simple question for us all. Which of these two cultures would you prefer to be part of? Which of these two cultures do we think Jesus' church will become famous for? Or should become famous for? I know which one I'd prefer. As we're coming into land now, you know this church has been amazing, as I've said, at doing this over the years. And I know that we will continue to be amazing at it as we move into our future together. But let's just be real just for a moment. Because the last 2 years have been challenging, right? I wonder if you're a bit like me. Knowing that you were told that you had to live in isolation, that actually living in community was actually dangerous. I wonder whether or not you started to find that your kind of like one anothering muscles have become a little bit flabby. Whether rust has started to get kind of, started to set in. I wonder whether or not you found old habits that maybe you were really in practice doing of one anothering well, actually maybe have just kind of got a bit lost or a bit dusty. Are there any habits that are up here? Here's the list of 12 again, that maybe you could take as a personal kind of encouragement today and try and pick up. During this time of preparation, remember, we've said that the groom has gone to prepare a place for us in heaven. And we, his bride, the church painted as a bride, are encouraged to prepare ourselves. And Jesus has given us this instruction to love one another so that others may know that we are his disciples. Are there aspects here that you think, do you know what, I could pick that up as a challenge today? You know what? This culture, this one anothering will make a difference, not just for our church, but in your home. It'll make a difference in your community, in your schools and colleges, in your workplaces, on the playground, when you meet other families, or when you're stood in the supermarket and maybe speaking to people in there. It will make a difference, changing cultures and helping to restore community again. It's going to affect generations. Is that exciting? Is it exciting to think we could live in A, not B? I get excited by this. I'm excited that we could change our communities to be more A than B. Jesus said this, love one another as I have loved you. I wonder, could I invite the band to come back up? Is that okay? Thank you. Love one another as I have loved you. As we're coming into land here, all right, as we head back into our time of worship and we prepare for departing from this place and going back out into the real world, into our everyday lives again, I want you to remember that the words that Jesus spoke over his disciples all those years ago, he speaks over you today. He says, I love you. He says, I delight in you. He says, I am coming for you. Why don't we stand? We're going to sing again. We're going to worship King Jesus. I want you to remember this. The Jesus that we're worshiping, the Jesus that got everyone excited before I came up to speak, he is the one who welcomes us. He has welcomed you. He is the one that invites you to be part of his family. He's the one who accepts you and who builds you up. He's the one who cares for your every need. He's the one who is cheering you on this week. He is the one who bears with you when you mess it all up and stumble. He is the one who has forgiven you and will always forgive you and forgive you and forgive you. He is the one who has sacrificed himself in order to make you holy and blameless. that when the groom returns, you'll be presented as beautiful to him. So let's sing and worship this Jesus. Let's go, church.
You're like a circle that floats around me, keeping me safe and sound. And when I fall, you tied a rope to me. You're blessing me every day.